What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another ramble video. Maybe the ramble video of all ramble videos. In ramble videos, I basically just pour out my thoughts, and what better time than right now to pour out my thoughts because Rip City is basically on fire, and this is a nightmare. This is the nightmare, at least for me, because I've been ride or die for Damian Lillard, and now Damian Lillard has requested a trade. And now a part of this fan base has turned on him, which I find absolutely ridiculous. Before we jump into things, hit that subscribe button below. We'll be doing watch parties for Summer League games. You don't want to miss those. We'll be seeing Rip City's future out there in Las Vegas. And also, leave a like on this video as it helps out the channel. And let's just start talking about the fan backlash, I guess, because that has been upsetting me over the past couple of days. And part of the backlash regarding Damian Lillard demanding a trade was, you preached loyalty, Dame, and now you're demanding a trade. You gave other stars some crap for jumping from team to team, but now you're going to jump to another team. You said you didn't just want to play for a super team, but now you want to go to the Miami Heat, who have made the finals in 2 out of the past 4 years and just made the finals last year. So you went against your word. That is the crux of a lot of the backlash for Damian Lillard. But I don't think Damian Lillard really wanted to leave. I think he was basically forced to leave. I think that the organization and Dame had a stated commitment with each other to build a winning team around Damian Lillard. The front office said they wanted to do that. Damian Lillard said that that's what he wanted. And if that had happened, there was no chance that Damian Lillard was going to ask out of Portland. But in the past couple of years since Joe Cronin has taken over, he has not fulfilled his promise or his stated goals regarding building a winner around Damian Lillard. He, of course, brought in Jeremy Grant, but other than that, has not brought in a single win-now piece. The GP2 situation was a debacle, and Gary Payton II was hurt when the Blazers signed him and didn't even want to come to Portland. He wanted to be in Golden State. Otherwise, all Portland has done is bring in young players and given away players. They gave away CJ McCollum, Norman Powell, Robert Covington, and Larry Nance Jr., with the only win-now piece that they brought back being Jeremy Grant. They basically got further away from surrounding Damian Lillard with a winning roster. They lost role players that would help them win. At the 2022 trade deadline, a lot of people preached that Joe Cronin was getting rid of bad contracts, quote-unquote, in order to increase flexibility so that they could make the proper moves to build a winner around Dame. But we haven't seen the increased flexibility result in anything. All that it's resulted in is Jeremy Grant, and Dame helped recruit him. Dame had as much or more of a part in that than Joe Cronin did. But outside of that, all it's resulted in is lost seasons and draft picks. The Blazers, of course, got back Josh Hart in the CJ McCollum trade, but ended up trading him for a late first-round pick in Cam Reddish at last year's trade deadline. So, after last year's trade deadline, Joe Cronin had a quote that basically sums everything up, and I'm going to play it for you.
You won't see from this group a lack of trying or a lack of innovation or a lack of creativity. We're going to be ridiculously aggressive to the point where once we push our chips all the way in, like deal to deal, you might look and say, wow, they lost that deal. They gave a lot for that guy. But no, that's just us pushing our chips in. We feel extremely obligated to put a great roster around Damian Lillard. And when I say we, that's from the top. Jody and I have had a lot of conversations about how important it is for us to do right by Damian. And we plan to do that.
So Joe Cronin literally stated that they are extremely obligated to build a winner around Dame, and implied even if it's an overpay, even if a deal doesn't look great on paper, they have that obligation to build around Dame. It's funny how only a few months later that became a situation where the narrative was, well, the Blazers, it wouldn't have been a good deal for them to trade the third pick. It would have been an overpay for certain guys, and that was the narrative that Joe Cronin started pitching. Joe Cronin has contradicted himself massively in the past 4 to 5 months, starting with that quote specifically. In Joe Cronin's exit interview, he lamented the lack of size and the youth on the team. They needed to get bigger. They needed to get more veterans. And they needed to be aggressive. And in his extra interview, Joe Cronin doubled down on the types of statements that I just played for you, that they were going to be aggressive in terms of building a win-now team around Dame. The Blazers, of course, ended up getting the 3rd overall pick in the draft lottery, and a lot of people were looking at it as a great thing because the Blazers would be able to trade the 3rd pick and get a true star or an impactful player or impactful pieces to build that win-now team around Dame. Even if it looked like an overpay, the Blazers had that obligation to Dame, as Joe Cronin stated himself. Even if you don't feel like the Blazers should have had that obligation and going the young route was the right route for the Blazers, Joe Cronin specifically stated that they had that obligation, and that was his goal, and he stated that for his entire tenure as Portland Trail Blazers general manager, and it was obvious that that's what he was telling Damian Lillard. So fast forward to the NBA draft. Portland elects to draft a 6'2", 19-year-old point guard. Same position as Damian Lillard. They don't trade a single pick. They have the 23rd pick as well. Don't trade that pick either. But continued to preach that they want to build a win-now team around Dame. But when Cronin, in his press conference after the draft, was asked about going the young route, even though that wasn't the plan that was stated, that wasn't what Damian Lillard wanted, Cronin tried to weasel his way out of a contradiction by saying that, well, Scoot Henderson's been playing pro for 2 years, so he's not a normal 19-year-old, and Chris Murray's almost 23, and he's a guy that is a low-mistake player, ready to come in and play right away, and Ryan Rupert has been playing professionally overseas in New Zealand. Basically just tried to excuse the fact that he went against basically the plan to build a winner around Dame, because drafting guys with those picks is not building a winner around Dame. Even if you think it's the right move on paper, it's not what Cronin stated that he had an obligation to do. And even if you didn't want an overpay in a trade, Cronin said that they were obligated to potentially overpay in order to surround Damian Lillard with a winning roster. And that's the problem. Is at the 2022 trade deadline, the Blazers traded away 4 role players and got back very little. Traded CJ McCollum where he wanted to go. Traded Norman Powell where he wanted to go. And even at last year's trade deadline, traded GP2 where he wanted to go. And potentially got back lower asset value by doing this, right? Sure, okay, it looks good on the GM, but man, Cronin gave away players at the 2022 trade deadline. In the 2022 offseason, he added Jeremy Grant. Props to Dame for recruiting him. And Dame was happy with that. That's all it took, was adding Jeremy Grant. Because otherwise, they drafted a 19-year-old Shaedon Sharpe who didn't play in college. And, you know, it was the right pick for sure. But the Blazers didn't elect to trade that 7th overall pick and maybe an overpay for an OG Anunoby or whatever. I'm not saying that's what I wanted. But, you know, that would have shown Dame that they were trying to build a winner around him. So they draft Shaedon Sharpe, but it's fine. They brought in Jeremy Grant, so they showed Dame, okay, we're going to go out there and get a piece, despite entering the final year of his deal, that can help you win. Other than that Jeremy Grant trade, there's really been nothing else to show Dame that they're trying to win. They traded away Josh Hart for an expiring Cam Reddish and a first-round pick, a late first. Then they drafted someone with that late first. They drafted someone with the 3rd overall pick. They basically have not added a role player in the past year. The Blazers have not added a single role player to help Damian Lillard win in the past year. You can say Scoot Henderson is that, but I'm talking about via trade, via moving assets for more win-now pieces, not just drafting players. They have not added a role player in the past year. They've lost one in Josh Hart. You could say Matisse Thybulle is a role player. He's not as good as Josh Hart. He is a fringe rotation player on a winning team. In my opinion, that's exactly what he was in Philadelphia, and he's still a free agent. Who knows if the Blazers even sign him? So Portland has kind of failed on their promise to build that winner around Dame and acquire players to help him win. And the narrative from a lot of fans that defend Joe Cronin has been wait till the offseason, wait till the trade deadline, wait till free agency. Even after the Blazers drafted Scoot Henderson, it was wait till free agency. Cronin has something up his sleeve. And on the first day of free agency, where Dame had still yet to request a trade, all Portland did was re-sign Jeremy Grant and literally did nothing else. Now you can argue that there was no good moves available at Cronin's disposal, and you know, he would have had to drastically overpay, and it would have been too much of an overpay, even given Cronin's comments that I played. But at some point, you have to hold a GM accountable for inactivity, because us fans will never truly know what was on the table and what wasn't. Therefore, there will be people that always excuse inactivity because the argument will be, well, what did you want them to trade the 3rd overall pick for? What was there to be done? You can always excuse inactivity from a general manager if you approach it with the mindset of, well, what was there to be done that you wanted them to do? Because we don't know what was on the table and what wasn't. It is funny how fans just assume there was nothing good on the table, but also say that Scoot Henderson is a generational prospect. That logic doesn't really necessarily add up to me. There is people with the belief that there was some legitimate offers that could have been had for Joe Cronin, but he didn't even really seriously shop the 3rd overall pick. If that's true, Cronin basically just lied to Dame and completely broke his obligation. But even if there wasn't a good deal on the table, it was Cronin's obligation to possibly overpay in order to win around Dame. And that's not my words, those are Joe Cronin's. So as far as Cronin's goal for building a win-now team around Dame in the past 18 months, he either lied about that being his intention and wanted to go this young route, or he massively failed in his obligations as general manager of the Portland Trail Blazers, and that's based off the standards that he himself set with his own words. So Cronin deserves a lot of blame for the Blazers reaching this point. And in my opinion, Joe Cronin broke his commitment to Damian Lillard that he said he had. So it is a bit silly to me to excuse Joe Cronin's actions as general manager while giving Damian Lillard blame for quote-unquote breaking his word or breaking his commitment or breaking his loyalty, because it's very clear that the Blazers have not built a winner around Dame the past 18 months, despite saying they would. It's very clear that the Blazers have not lived up to their end of the bargain and have not lived up to their word. Regardless of if you think that was the wrong move or not, I don't see how you can fault Damian Lillard for going against his word when the franchise did. To me, it's like, let's say Dame and the Blazers are in a relationship, a romantic relationship, and Dame's saying, I'll be with you forever. But then the Blazers go out and cheat on him. So then Dame says, you know what, you cheated on me, you broke our commitment, I'm done. I want out of this marriage. In such a scenario, it's silly to me to give Dame crap for breaking the commitment or breaking his loyalty or not being a man of his word. Makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. But it is funny to me how people just assume that Joe Cronin didn't have anything that he could have possibly done with the 3rd overall pick. I don't really understand where that assumption comes from, because that is all that is an assumption. Nobody knows for sure that Cronin seriously shopped the 3rd overall pick. No one knows for sure what Joe Cronin even explicitly wanted. And Dame wanted to have a winning team here in Portland. Damian Lillard obviously wanted to be in Portland. It's not obvious what Joe Cronin wanted because all his actions the past 18 months have not matched his words. He stated goals and stated he had an obligation to build a win around Dame and then failed to reach those goals. It did not live up to that obligation. And it's either due to Cronin's inability to execute, or Joe Cronin just simply flat out lied and wanted to go the young route. Either way, it is not acceptable to me whatsoever. But unfortunately, that's not how a lot of this fan base apparently feels. A lot of this fan base has turned against Dame and is vigorously defending Joe Cronin. And, in my opinion, a big part of the Portland Trail Blazers fan base has a problem with holding nice guys accountable. It happened with Terry Stotts, and it's happening right now with Joe Cronin. Because those guys are nice guys and relatable, they get more of a pass than people who act more like maybe a Neil O'Shea would. It's funny because if Neil O'Shea was still the general manager, a lot of the people defending Joe Cronin would have criticized Neil O'Shea's moves in the past 18 months. And yes, Neil O'Shea is partly to blame for everything he did before he got fired as Portland Trail Blazers general manager, but you would not be hearing the same narratives about, oh, well, there's nothing O'Shea could have done with the 3rd overall pick. O'Shea was backed into a corner and had to draft with the 3rd overall pick. All the excuses made in the moment during Joe Cronin's entire tenure would not have been made in the moment for Neil O'Shea. And this is not an effort to defend Neil O'Shea whatsoever. He was not a good general manager. It doesn't have to be one guy is good, one guy is bad. Unfortunately, it seems like a lot of Blazer fans have to have that mindset where it's either Cronin or O'Shea. You gotta like one of them. I don't like either of them. Neil Olshey would have been absolutely blasted for not trading the 3rd overall pick this past offseason, and he should have been. But with Joe Cronin, he automatically gets a pass, seemingly to me because he's a nice guy. People trust him. So they take him for his word. But then when his words don't match his actions, and then his words contradict each other in the past few months, then it's, well, what do you expect a GM to say? He has to say these things. He has to say he wants to build a winner, even if he wants to go young, and he has no option. And it's become a situation where a lot of the excuses for Joe Cronin are basically, well, he had no choice. You know, he didn't have a good trade for the 3rd pick. There was no good trade to be made. He was basically helpless and had to draft with the 3rd pick. And he had to say everything he said. He had no choice. He had to say those things despite that not being the truth. It's just absolutely ridiculous how Joe Cronin has been made out to be someone who's completely helpless and therefore not accountable in this situation at all. But meanwhile, Damian Lillard, who has been a Portland Trailblazer for over a decade, put up with a bunch of crap from this organization, a bunch of incompetence from Neil Olshey and Joe Cronin, has given his all for very subpar rosters and carried them to playoff berths, who's been great in the community, who's been a solid man, who's been a quality person. Somehow, when he's finally had enough with the inability for a Portland Trailblazers general manager to build a winner around him, to stick true to their word, to stick true to the obligation that the Portland front office has stated that it has, somehow when he's done with that, he's the bad guy. It's absolutely ludicrous to me. And I am very disappointed with a big section of this fan base. And this, as I've stated, is a completely different conversation than the arguments made that, you know, Portland should have gone this way, or Damian Lillard's going to decline in 2 years, so it's smart just to push him out of Portland or whatever. But it's more so about how this front office handled things, how this front office completely failed to execute the plan that they themselves set forth for themselves. And it's about how that should not be then pinned on Damian Lillard because he's had enough of it. I know people were mad at Dame for putting public pressure on the Portland Trailblazers front office to go out and make that win now trade. And there's been an argument that Dame basically shot himself in the foot because the pressure he put on publicly made it hard for the Blazers to get a deal because other teams knew that the Blazers were desperate to build a winner around Dame and therefore wouldn't give the Blazers a good deal. But that argument makes no sense to me because it should have been common knowledge around the league that Damian Lillard wants to win. He's a soon-to-be 33-year-old superstar coming off his best season ever. Of course he wants to win. Of course he doesn't want to lose. Of course the Blazers want to make a trade to help him win if they're trying to negotiate a trade to help him win. So I don't see how the deals that would be on the table drastically change because teams make trades for their own reasons over anything else. And if a team really wants Scoot Henderson, I don't see an NBA team saying, you know what, we really want Scoot, and we think he'd be a great piece for our future. We think he's a future superstar, but we're not going to trade for him because it would make Dame happy, and he would stay in Portland, and therefore you wouldn't get screwed. Like, people seriously think that NBA organizations want to see the Blazers fall apart more so than they want to fulfill their own wants and needs for their own roster and organization. How does that make any sense? How does Cronin not have leverage when he has a quote-unquote generational guard prospect that he is essentially trying to trade away that a ton of teams would have supposedly wanted, but Damian Lillard saying he wants to win makes it so that those teams aren't as willing to trade for that prospect they really, really want? It's just baffling how there is Blazer fans out there searching for any reason to get mad at Dame over this situation, while simultaneously searching for reasons to not get mad at the front office. It just doesn't make sense logically to me. And the other thing that fans are mad at with Damian Lillard is the fact that he is trying to force his way to one team. But if you're going to request a trade out of a place you didn't want to leave, but basically are forced to because the organization isn't committed to building a winner around you and drafted your replacement instead, why wouldn't you try and go to a place where you want to go to? Now, the Blazers don't have to trade Dame where he wants to go, and I'm sure Dame knows that. But of course, Dame is going to act in his best interest since the front office is acting in theirs. Portland can try and get Dame to be open to going to other teams then, if he really wants to leave that bad. But it's baffling to me that fans are mad at a star for asking for a trade to a team that they want to go to the most. That's what stars do. That's to be expected. Just like the organization will choose the path they want the most, Damian Lillard will also try and choose the path that he wants the most. I really don't understand getting mad at Dame for that. It's not like the organization made a bunch of steps to build around him and then Dame just randomly switched up and said, you know what, actually I want to go to the Heat. You've committed to building around me, but I don't want to be here anymore, and left the Blazers in a bad spot. The Blazers are actually in a solid spot to start a rebuild because that is the path that they've chosen. Like, Dame didn't run from the grind. The Portland Trailblazers front office didn't give him an opportunity to grind. I mean, this is the same organization that was 2.5 games out of 4th during last year's trade deadline and elected to blow it up. There was a chance that they could have pushed for a playoff spot, could have maybe even gotten home court advantage if they played really, really well down the stretch. Instead of executing moves to make that happen at the trade deadline, they traded away Josh Hart and got back Cam Reddish and Matisse Thybulle. They got worse at the deadline, and then they tried to tank, supposedly so that they could have a good draft pick asset that they could then use in a trade to build around Dame. This organization ran from the grind when they ran from the opportunity to be a playoff team last year so that they could tank the rest of the year. And Dame was still willing to wait that out and see, and, was hopeful that the 3rd overall pick would become a player that could help him win now. It didn't. This front office absolutely failed Damian Lillard. This front office absolutely failed upon the plans that they said they had. This front office might have lied in regards to the direction they wanted to go and the obligation they had to build a win-now team around Dame. And that is disgusting. And at this point, I want nothing more than Jody Allen to sell the team and the new owner to come in and replace every member of this Portland Trail Blazers front office, other than maybe Mike Schmitz. Because you absolutely cannot trust Joe Cronin. Because his actions don't match his words. And at this point, I don't really know where my emotional investment in this team is going to be over the next couple years until it's sold, because it's hard to put a bunch of emotions into this organization, because it is truly hard being a diehard fan and putting all this emotion into the Portland Trail Blazers when they will backstab the best player in franchise history and essentially force him out of town. And then if you show those emotions like Eric did, where he kind of broke down a little bit on our stream right after Dame requested a trade, he cried on stream, and then you have assholes out there saying, wow, you're really crying over this team, you're really crying over the Portland Trail Blazers. And it's funny because those same fans will say, you're not actually a Blazer fan at the same time. It's really upsetting because we are Blazer fans. And Damian Lillard meant the world to us as Blazer fans. Damian Lillard meant a ton to the organization. And unfortunately, that might not have really mattered to the organization. So of course it's going to hurt. Of course it's painful. It feels like a breakup. I personally feel a bit dead inside. A guy like Eric and other fans would not be this upset if they weren't such big Blazer fans. Anyway, we'll have more coverage on this. I'll touch upon a couple other things live tomorrow on our second channel, Blazers Uprise Live, link in the description box below. And I'll probably make another video or two, assuming this trade saga is going to extend. But the moment Dame gets traded, we will go live with a stream right here on the main channel. And you guys can come in and voice your opinions. But this absolutely sucks. This is the worst offseason as a Blazer fan I've ever experienced. This is worse than the LaMarcus Aldridge saga where he left for nothing. And this absolutely sucks. I'm miserable as a diehard Blazer fan, as somebody that's poured so much emotional investment into both this team but then also this channel. And as far as this channel going forward, it's more so about trying to enjoy the team building process and enjoy Scoot Henderson and Shaden Sharp being on this roster with the community, more so than it is me being happy or a fan of this organization as it is currently run, because I'm fed up. I'm pissed. But you guys are awesome. The community is awesome. And it will be fun to watch Scoot Henderson and Shaden Sharp and see this team be kind of built out from the ashes with those young guys and with whatever the Blazers get back for Damian Lillard. I enjoy the CBA and roster moves and team building and discussing that type of stuff, so we'll continue to do that. And at some point, I hope my passion and emotion for this Portland Trailblazers team returns. It might be at the start of next season. It might be in Summer League. I don't know, but I've never really felt this way as a fan of the Portland Trailblazers because I just honestly can't believe what has happened, and I can't believe how the front office has handled things up to this point. I can't believe we're here.